My name's Bill Briggio. I've had the privilege for the last 22 years of being the city manager here in Augusta, and I wanted to talk a little bit today about the importance of providing a new facility for the dedicated men and women who serve us so well in our police department. I've been a professional municipal manager for almost 40 years at this point in several different communities. I like to think that I've learned over the years a few things about local municipal police work and the vitally important service that provides. That is especially true here in Augusta, where I believe we are perhaps the luckiest community in Maine when it comes to the dedication and the capabilities of the men and women in the Augusta Police Department. There are 65 souls who live and work out of that facility, and we have needed to upgrade or replace it for any number of years. You're going to hear today from others who will speak to the particulars of this compelling community need. But I wanted to introduce the topic by assuring you that your mayor, your city council, your city manager, and the rest of your professional staff in the city of Augusta are deeply committed to marshaling your property taxes as responsibly as possible, while at the same time meeting the important needs of our public safety workforce.
Hello everybody, and welcome to an edition of a formal chat with the Chief here in the CTV7 studios. I'm your Chief Jared Mills, and today I'm here with Director of Developmental Services, Matt Nazar.
Thank you, Chief. Great to be here with you.
Thank you for being here. Obviously, we're going to talk about the building today, and there's no better person for us to talk to than you, because you're the expert in the facilities, or that's one of the things that is in your purview, if you will, of the city. So tell us a little bit about where we started, moving into the building, what year we did that, and what was the original plan?
Well, the original plan on that building, as I understand it, I've been with the city now since 2006, and facilities management is within my department. So I've had an opportunity to be able to spend some significant time in each of the buildings that the city has. That particular building, the police department actually remained in the old City Hall. After most of the rest of city government moved out of the old City Hall and into where we are today here across the street from Old City Hall, the police stayed there for another decade. And in 1998, there needed to be something done. The existing facilities over there were not even close to meeting the police department's needs. And the city was given the existing police station by the Navy. It was an old Naval Reserve building. And in 1998, the city got it for $1 from the federal government and moved in as a temporary location for what was supposed to be a short period of time to be able to then find another facility for the police department at some point in the relatively near future. There were some minor updates that were done to the building at the time. Windows were updated. Some other small things were addressed in order to be able to allow the police to be housed there for a short period of time. But now we're 21 years later. Exactly. And the building has got some significant issues at this point.
Sure, and we'll go through those. Yeah, so for me as well, it was the same thing. I came in '98, but it was just after we moved to the facility. Memory doesn't really serve me that clear 21 years ago, but I can say it's my understanding that when we occupied that space from the old City Hall, which I'm told that was a significant improvement on Union Street and where we were at City Hall, that we basically, occupied the space that was there with no real, professional design or layout of a police station. It was just kind of the offices were there and that type of thing. So walking through the department, we enter the building from the front side. Yep. And we kind of see our first efficiency with the stairs and that type of thing. It's blocked off right now. We've decided not to fix that area. Can you talk a little bit about that as to the thought process?
Sure. There's there are quite a number of things with the building that at this point, from a facilities perspective, we've tried to maintain the building in a form where the police could obviously continue to do their jobs and continue to occupy it, but with the knowledge that it was never designed as a police station, doesn't function well as a police station because it doesn't have modern design. It's basically an office building. And with the anticipation or expectation that it was never intended as a long-term solution. So the deficiencies that we have today are ones that we've, over the years, to a certain extent, band-aided rather than doing full updates and upgrades. And especially since the 2005 Katrina event and then the 2012 Sandy event, there have been some significant changes in building codes over the last 15 to 20 years that have been required in order to meet current standards for emergency services or critical facilities buildings. So the amount of work that we've done to the building in order to maintain it has been enough to try and keep everybody in the building and safe in the building, being able to move around in the building, but not so much work that we needed to come up to today's current building code standards, because in order to meet today's building code standards, you really have to do some very significant work to the building, millions and millions of dollars, rather than the smaller work in order to just sort of keep us there temporarily.
Understood. Yeah, and that's kind of where we're at today. It was do we go out for a bond and try to rehab where we're at, or do we take a step back and see how would the city be best served with a newer facility that is meant to be a police department, or moving out for several months to try to rehab a particular facility.
And that's the difficulty at this point. We're at a place where you can no longer simply do the small things and be able to maintain the building. Some of the big things have started to come up. The front steps are just sort of a symptom of the larger problems with the building. Those front steps at this point, as you showed in an earlier chat with the chief, there's a ramp that works as an alternative. It's not a great alternative, but if the voters decide that the next step is to construct a new police station, one of the thought processes that we've had in facilities management is to try not to spend too much money maintaining a building that might ultimately be torn down. Until we have a real decision on what's going to happen there, we'll try and maintain the building so that it's safe and comfortable. But the big things, or things that aren't 100% necessary, we're putting off for the moment.
Which makes sense, and the staff is all aware of that as well. We've had those discussions internally that if we're going to do something big and spend a lot of money, either elsewhere or once that decision is made, we're going to just maintain what we have. So that's good. So we walk into the building. Let's move in inside, if you will, and there's a vestibule that you walk into, and then you take a right, and then there's a lobby.
Right.
So the setup of that is served us for 21 years, but it's kind of like when we started the process and met with the architects and actually learned how an efficient police building is laid out. That was one of the first things we noticed. Describe to me a little bit about that. How you see it as it should be laid out.
Yeah, that was actually one of the interesting things over the course of the last 9 months to a year that I've learned that I was unaware of, because I'm not a police station designer. Better understanding the needs of a police department, how that differs from your typical office building. And I think that you may have come across some things that you were unaware of as well, and seen some efficiencies in some of the other buildings that we ended up touring, and as a result realized that you can operate a whole lot safer and more efficiently if you have a building that's actually designed to be a police department rather than an office that's trying to act as a police department. The space, as you know, when you walk into the space, it's not designed to separate individuals who probably shouldn't be commingled in one space at the same time. And you could speak better to those issues.
Yeah. That was one of the things we learned right off is the questions asked. When you have different clientele that come into the station. How are they separated? And basically they're not at this point. Everybody sits in the same lobby and waits for whatever service we're going to provide them. And what we learned quickly is in a efficiently designed building, you would have two places to go. There would be essentially a lobby where you'd be triaged, and then you'd either kind of go to the left or right to be where you would finally end up, which leads us into the discussion of safety and security internally.
Right. So what? Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, that's you know how to run a police station. I have some idea of how to build some stuff, but tell me what you think on security issues.
So I'll chat a little bit with myself about that.
Yeah, please.
And educate. But no, certainly.
Educate me.
That's right. Yeah. So when we walk in, you know, to the existing facility, we're going to walk right past. If you're here for a sex offender, or if you're at the department for a sex offender registry, you're going to walk right past the main offices of the patrol division, the briefing, and the whole 9 yards. If you're a school teacher looking for fingerprints, you're going to walk right down the middle of the building. And
those are some of the clients that you get on a regular basis that are coming in and out of the police station on a regular monthly basis anyway, who are it's a real mixture of individuals. It's not just people who are being brought to the police station in a car. It may be somebody who's showing up for a registry, somebody who's showing up for fingerprints, kids who are showing up for tours.
That's correct. Yeah, and it is, and you do. You're guiding, you're walking people through the building. You're assigning, staff to do that type of stuff. So, right. In a more efficient layout, in some of the other places we've toured, that's broken up. So that's one of the first things that we see, and obviously, the cosmetic parts of the building, we can get past, but the floors, we would describe it as like a tired facility. The floors, yeah. They're warped in some places, need replacing in other areas. But again, we're waiting and we're holding off until a final decision is made. Walking into the Sallyport from the patrol area, we get in the back. There's some deficiencies in the Sallyport as well that we see. It's kind of the design number one.
Tell me a little bit about what a Sallyport is.
Yes, and I'm glad you say that, because I throw that word out like police jargon, but certainly a Sallyport's like a garage. That's where we bring our folks in, whether you're under arrest or otherwise. If you're entering from the back of the building, you would go into the garage, aka Sallyport, which is a secure area where you can drive a vehicle in.
It's an area where a vehicle can be brought in, the door can be brought down, and it's a safe place to be able to remove someone from a vehicle and be able to do whatever needs to be done with that individual, booking them and or whatever you need to do.
That's right, absolutely, and we do that on a frequent basis. Right. As a matter of fact, when I was leaving just recently, that was happening as we're speaking. So, we have that, and in an efficient design, you wouldn't really back in and back out, which is what we do. We can fit about 2 vehicles in there right now. They have to go one in front of the other, and if you have to move, it's always, or you can drive in or back in, but you got to do the reverse coming out. So that's an issue. Most Sallyports or all police buildings are designed now where you would drive in and drive out. We have some drainage issues that I don't know if you've seen recently, but there's a trench when you bring the vehicles in the wintertime. The snow melts off from the vehicles. So a lot of times that water leaks into our booking rooms and that type of thing.
Great. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
So you get, and that's likely because a lot of sand and other grit and whatever gets down into those trenches and they don't drain properly.
Correct. So that's obviously something that would be corrected in a newer or an upgrade, if you will. Our evidence storage in that area, we have a temporary storage facility where we would bring prisoners in, take the property off them, and we would temporarily store that. And a more efficient design, the designs that have been presented to us and the way police departments are constructed in this day and age, your evidence would be centrally located to all of your services. Mm-hmm. So our patrol division, our detective division, our records division would all be around the evidence room, if you will. So there'd be one stop. You wouldn't have a temporary holding place and then have to handle evidence more than once.
And that's important from an efficiency perspective, because evidence, when it comes into the facility, has to be very carefully tracked and recorded. So the more times it has to be moved, the more times it has to be touched, the more work it is for you guys to be able to make sure that doesn't create problems for being able to deal with whatever crime or situation it is as it ends up working its way through the court process. Is that correct?
Correct, and it can come under scrutiny, obviously, because the more you handle it. So we have to take extra time, less efficient in documentation and that type of thing. So moving past the out of the Sallyport garage, we're moving towards the south side of the building, if you will. We walk past where we store all of our water. That's a good time to talk about our water situation at the police department. What's the situation with that?
You can't drink it.
Yes.
Which was a real surprise to me. I've been in the position of director of the department that I'm running at this point that has facility management, and for some reason it just never came up that the police couldn't drink the water in the building that they occupy, and never have been able to because of lead in the pipes. And it's lead internal to the building, not uncommon for a building that was built in 1949, but something that was never corrected by the Navy, and obviously never corrected by the city, and would be very expensive to correct at this point, because the plumbing is not just in the walls, it's in the slab and all throughout the building. So being able to replumbing the building would have been a very expensive process. The solution had been instead that the police would drink bottled water, which is what you've done for 21 years in the building. Like I said, I learned about that actually just 2 years ago. It really surprised me.
Yes, yeah.
That's a really a very surprising thing to be able to walk into a building in 2019 and you can't drink the water coming out of the pipes.
Right, and most of the time that serves us well.
Sure.
The employees enjoy the filtered bottled water, if you will, but we actually ran into a situation last week where they've got either a shortage of drivers or whatever the reason was that we couldn't get our regularly delivered bottled water. So we actually had to go for a weekend and then into the next week with actually sending uniform officers out to stores to purchase water, because you have to have water.
Not an efficient use of an officer's time, I would assume.
Correct, and I was surprised I didn't get any calls from the public, but if they did see that, they were actually on the clock, making sure that we had the water that was needed for the station. So that's obviously an issue that would be corrected
Absolutely.
one way or the other. And then, we'd move on from there into the back gym area that we have, which is a huge space, really humongous. It wouldn't be anything we would ever think that we would have that size in any newer building, if you will, but it is doubled with an archives area, a storage area for some other files and things that don't need to be archived. Then there's an equipment storage facility in that, all partitioned off, and then a place where the custodians have their equipment as well. So we have basically one room that doubles as several different functions.
Triples or quadruples, yeah.
Quadruples. So obviously with that as well, that can be an issue, for efficiency in the design and layout. And really, this is a point where I could say some of our spaces in transparency are too big. We actually have more space than we need, which is serves to talks about the efficiency portion.
Yeah, and it's right now the space that you occupy is about a 36,000 square foot space, and the architects have in the redesign for a new building have shown about a 25,000 square foot building that would serve not just current needs, but some future needs, with obviously opportunity for expansion if you built a new building. So you got about 10,000 extra square feet of space than you currently need, but that's just the nature of what we got for $1.
Sure. So then we move out of the gym area and we move into the information services area, where we also have our permanent storage lockers for evidence in that area, as well as our dispatch center and our clerical area. And in that area, very cramped space. We have 3 dispatch terminals. Our calls for service aren't going down, they're going up. So any future growth would be stunted, if you will, and we wouldn't be able to allow for or allot for another terminal in that space. So obviously in any future design or any new police department, there would be room for that growth in our dispatch center, which is going to be needed very, very quickly. So So we have that, and then we move along to the upstairs.
Right, and that's important to know. This is a two-story building at this point. You do have an elevator in the building, but obviously in order to be able to access that elevator, you have to come through secure areas, and so there's some level of inconvenience if you're trying to show people through the building and get them up to the upstairs where a different set of functions occur.
Yeah, and I guess at this time it'd be important to note that we also share the entire building with our neighbors, you know, who occupy that space, and we actually share the elevator with them as well. However, the restriction is for them, if you will. We can get to their side, but they can't get to our side. It's keyed a certain way.
Right. Right. About a third of the building is occupied by two other offices: the Augusta Housing Authority and then Adult Ed.
Correct.
So
okay, good, good with that. And then, so we're moving along to the upstairs, whether we take the elevator or the stairs. There's three forms of egress there. What's the immediate thing we see on the roofs of the second floor?
Well, you seem to have a bit of a leak problem.
We do.
You get some water coming into the building, and we've had a study done of the roof, and that actually was what instigated a lot of this conversation last year. There have been some real needs that have occurred with respect to the police department building itself. As you mentioned, the stairs out front not having water. Some of the heating system, as we'll talk about probably, and cooling system are really extremely inefficient. It was built in 1949, so it wasn't constructed with modern HVAC requirements. But the roof, unfortunately, the roof on the building at this point is beyond its useful life. It's a rubber roof that has obviously a roof structure underneath it, and the structure at this point has a number of deficiencies where it's got some sags in it, so you get water that ponds and puddles, and it doesn't drain properly. And of course, with an old rubber roof, while we repeatedly patch it whenever leaks come up, the older it gets, the more fragile the rubber gets, the more often you end up getting leaks, and that's what the police department has been experiencing. And we've taken care of them as they've come up on an ongoing basis, but it's to a point where you really can't spend a lot more time patching that roof. It really needs to be replaced if you were going to stay in the building. And at that point, you've triggered some building code requirements that essentially bring us to this discussion. Sure. Is that building able to really be converted to a modern police station or not? And the answer to that is it really can't efficiently be converted to a modern police station. So we're in these discussions. But the roof leaks, and you guys have been really good to put up with it as long as you have, because it's while a lot of the spots at this point have been repaired, it still comes back on a regular basis, and I've seen the buckets as when I've walked around the police department, you know, collecting the water on rainy days and pointing towards another patch that needs to be done.
Sure.
How has that affected morale?
Well, morale and efficiency, right? So,
and efficiency.
So when we have a leak, and it isn't all the time,
right.
But you know, we're seeing a lot of it in the spring, right? When the snow's converting to water and slush, we can almost set our watch by it that we're going to get a leak somewhere, and it's impossible. It's a flat roof. I've been on it with Bob LeBrec at times, shoveling out while I should be doing police stuff or chief duties. I've been up helping out when there are leaks. Obviously, we've got to save the equipment that's in the department, so it's kind of an all hands on deck to get the totes and buckets out, taking folks away from
making sure that where the leak occurs, it doesn't do some damage to something that's critical, obviously.
Exactly. Yeah, we've had times where probably the worst case scenario is our server room. You know, there was a leak towards there, and we had to really do some immediate things. But obviously, that shifts our focus away from, you know, our regular work that has to be done. And it is. You know, over time, you know, you talk about morale. You know, for us, it's almost like, you know, my personal experience being there 21 years, you know, it wasn't until the last 4 or 5 years that I really noticed the decline, and obviously that's continued. Yeah. So, you know, on a day-to-day basis, we're such a busy department that you come in, you're doing your job, and you're not really looking around. But it isn't until those situations where there's a leak or something's
All of a sudden you're pulled away from the police work.
exactly. That's when it affects morale, and it's more frustration
Yeah.
than it is anything else, and you get that a lot. So yeah, it's obviously something we contend with, but you know, when you go day to day, it can have that long term.
And when those things occur, we get our facilities people over there to try and do what we can. But if it's a serious situation, obviously you guys are there immediately and take care of it immediately.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because there are we have contractors, we have a roof contractor, we have people that come out immediately, but it's just that time frame in between.
Right.
And it's not a building to be proud of. You know, it's not. We have the state police, sheriff's department. We used to do trainings in the building when it was at a point where we could do that, but now it's not anything we want to show off. You know, sometimes our counterparts, we can be cynical at times as police officers, and we'll give each other a hard time. And I certainly hear a fair share of that, of the hard time about the building.
Well, tell me a little bit about, as far as the building is concerned, tell me a little bit about how it functions with respect to heating and cooling and some of the things that some of your staff have experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, in certain areas, it's either too hot or too cool, right? So the heat's not working in certain times. I have one employee, Sue Blonson, who's a lifelong resident of Augusta. Right. Most people know Sue. She's worked the longest out of anybody at the police department currently. You know, she has blankets that she has on standby, and then she certainly has you know, the windows up at other times where the air conditioning, you talked about the HVAC system, that there are some deficiencies. Yeah. So we still have particular areas in the department that have air conditioners because the HVAC doesn't, you know.
It's not designed the way you would a modern building at this point. It uses the internal hallways essentially as where air is flowing through the building, and that's not how you would design or construct a modern building. It's not an efficient way of moving air around a building, and that's what you experience. You close a door in order to do an interview or to have a phone conversation, or you happen to be on the side of a building where the sun is at that point in the day or isn't at that point in the day, and you're either too hot or too cold. Just because you can't efficiently move the heated and cool air around the building. Second floor, what else can you tell me about the second floor and how that functions, and some of the issues that you may have, the locker rooms, the restrooms?
Yeah, you know, obviously the design. Let's talk second
Sure.
floor overall. You know, in the newer, you touched on it earlier, in the newer designs, there wouldn't be a second floor. That's not as efficient as a single floor layout, if you will. So, you know, obviously having to go up the stairs or you know, having the police department divided. Right now, the support services is on the second floor, and the patrol division's on the first. That is a way to do it, but it's not the most efficient way to do it. So, you know, I'd like to mention that, you know, while we're still on that topic, and then I can move into the bathrooms. You know, all of the locker rooms and you know, we have other single bathrooms, but where the backbone of our department, the patrol division on the first floor, where they operate, their locker rooms are on the second floor, so they're detached from where they actually work in the station when they're in the station. Right. So that's a concern, just the layout, number one. That would be on the first floor if I could have a redo or do that over. But, you know, obviously in a new design, that would be much more efficient. And then the condition. The conditions are very, very difficult, I would say beyond tired, to the point of, you know, the floors are warped, they're slanted.
Anybody who has an old house and, you know, puts a marble down on one corner of the house and it rolls to the other side, that's exactly what you get in this part of the police station. Is the floors are badly, and it doesn't just slowly roll across the floor, it would rather quickly roll across the floor.
That's right, and it is, and it's not, it's set up like the showers and all the fixtures, everything's dated. And, you know, a lot of people might think, well, just put new showers in and call it a day. Well, you really can't do that, because you can talk about the codes and what that triggers. And what I've been told is you're talking a significant amount of money just to
redo a bathroom or a locker room area. Absolutely, to meet current ADA requirements and current building code requirements would be very significant.
Yep. And then, I would say in closing, the only other part that is significant, not obviously an issue or harm to us at this point, but we do know the building has asbestos in it.
Yes.
So if we ever did any work to the building, we would certainly have to contend with that as well.
Yes, absolutely. It's a situation that doesn't prevent any safety issues for employees that are in there, but obviously if you're doing any work to the building, it would have to be addressed. And so that's a significant concern as well.
Excellent. Well, I think we've covered most everything that we can. Is there anything I'm missing, Matt? That you
No. I think that from the efficiency perspective of the building, the condition of the building, we've talked about all of that. Obviously, you don't have secure areas outside the building either, where employees come and go from the building. So those are all important things that will be discussed as part of a redesign.
Yeah, absolutely. The external is a whole nother discussion of how you would design and we've actually altered our practices as well since learning different things from the architect. So we've made some things work to a certain extent, but not fully where they should be for our external security.
Well, thanks for allowing me to talk.
Yeah, no, this is great, and you've really clarified a lot of points within the building. So I appreciate you being here. We'll see you next time.